They made the mistake of thinking your patience was passivity, that your silence meant surrender. They mistook your slow responses, your studied reactions, as proof of compliance, never realizing you were simply watching, measuring, cataloging every inconsistency, every micro-manipulation, every act that reeked of power hunger masked as charm. They started a game built on rules they assumed you'd never question, a psychological board where they moved first and fast, laughing while you stayed still. But what they failed to see is that stillness doesn't mean absence. Sometimes, the quiet ones are simply calculating where to strike, so the entire table flips at once. And when you moved, you didn't play by their rules. You rewrote them. It began with subtlety. You no longer reacted on cue. You didn't rise when provoked, didn't chase when baited, didn't fold when guilt tripped. Your timing became surgical, your presence unreadable, and that alone began to unravel them. See, the game they started relied on your predictability. They needed you emotionally available, spiritually open, psychologically exposed. But now you were cloaked in something far more dangerous than armor, clarity. They couldn't gaslight you anymore because you'd stopped asking them for direction. You'd built your own compass, one they couldn't hack, couldn't decode. And when someone loses access to your confusion, they lose control over your reality. They thought they were building a masterpiece of manipulation, but they never planned for an opponent who was learning their moves in real time. You mirrored their strategy until you could mimic it. You studied their emotional sleight of hand until the illusion fell apart. And when you finally made your move, it wasn't rage. It was reconstruction. You didn't seek revenge. You made their presence obsolete. They began a game, thinking they were playing with a pawn. But you walked away, like the architect, who had already drawn the end in ink. You knew how it would end long before they realized the game had even shifted. What they wanted was power. What they created was a paradox. Because they fed off your energy, your light, your attention, and then ridiculed it once it wasn't theirs to own. It's the oldest trick in the book. Devalue what they can't control, belittle what they can't break. But you didn't need to prove your value to them. You knew what you brought to the table, even if they spent the whole meal pretending to be full. And when they finally noticed your absence, when the silence grew louder than their noise, it wasn't because they missed you. It was because they missed winning. But the game had already ended. You just didn't tell them. You no longer needed their recognition. That's what shattered them most, because the entire game was built around the illusion of mutual need. They needed to be needed. They needed to feel like the source. And the moment you showed them you could breathe without their oxygen, thrive without their permission, they began to panic. Their ego couldn't comprehend it. The attention that once felt guaranteed, gone. The reactions that once fed their hunger, starved. You walked out of the game and took the entire audience with you. And now, they perform in silence, clapping for themselves in a theater that only echoes what they've lost. You became the ending, not through vengeance, but through absence. And your absence was a weapon more devastating than any confrontation. Because they couldn't argue with it. They couldn't spin it. They couldn't flip the narrative when you stopped submitting your script. The game ended, not with a bang, but with your quiet decision to stop playing. That's the cruelest truth to manipulators. They only win if you stay on the board. And you left. Not dramatically, not bitterly, just completely. You took your power, your presence, your clarity, and exited with grace. And that kind of exit, it doesn't echo, it haunts. What they underestimated was your ability to evolve mid-conflict. Most people react. You adapt. Most people cry. You observe. They never expected you to grow stronger from the same game that was designed to keep you small. And now you're untouchable. Not because you hide, but because you've become ungameable. There's no leverage left, no bait you'll bite. You've disarmed the entire setup by becoming someone who no longer seeks their validation. And that's the one outcome they never prepared for, because they started a game thinking they'd always win. But they forgot. Games only work when both players agree to play. You didn't just end the game, you disassembled it, piece by piece. You turned every lesson into a weapon, every betrayal into a blueprint, every deception into data. You didn't respond with emotion, you responded with architecture. You built yourself out of the rubble they assumed would bury you. And now they're stuck in a game with no opponent. When you stopped explaining, they lost the script. Power returns to those who weaponize silence. They were so sure they had you mapped, labeled, categorized, boxed in, with the precision of someone who believes predictability is control. Every reaction you gave them, every emotionally charged clarification, every sentence that began with, "What I meant was," became fuel for their theater. They weren't listening to understand. They were listening to rehearse. Your explanations weren't dialogue. They were monologue auditions. They studied your justifications like actors memorizing their lines for a play you didn't know you were in. But then, something inside you snapped, not violently, but permanently. You stopped explaining, and when you did, they lost the script. Their whole performance depended on your need to be understood. Now they're standing on stage, lights hot, audience silent, and no cue cards in sight. They try to improvise now. Repeat back phrases you used with none of the meaning. They mimic the language of healing without ever doing the work. They say things like, "I hear you, and I've changed," not because they have, but because that's what the old version of you used to melt for. But your silence now, it doesn't need to scream. It doesn't ask. It exposes. It shines a light on how much of their identity was wrapped around controlling yours. And they can feel the disconnect, like cold steel in their throat. Because silence from someone who used to explain everything doesn't feel like indifference. It feels like judgment. And the worst kind of judgment is the one that never needs to speak. They were addicted to the sound of your second guessing. It made them feel important, powerful, needed. Every time you explained, they recalibrated their role in the story. You gave them edits, rewrites, reshoots. But when you fell silent, when you stopped offering emotional edits, they panicked. Because now the narrative no longer bends around them. Now the camera lingers on their flaws, and no one is yelling cut. Your silence is the new director. And it doesn't offer notes, it just records. And that terrifies them, because manipulators can't control what they can't provoke. And when you stopped being predictable, they stopped being powerful. Silence became your weapon, not because it hurts, but because it clarifies. It doesn't strike, it reveals. It doesn't beg, it warns. And now, with every second you don't respond, they're forced to confront the raw footage of their behavior. You're no longer playing defense. You're sitting back with your arms crossed, while the house they built on lies collapses under its own weight. Your silence isn't passive, it's forensic. It's watching, calculating, measuring whether their actions align with their repentance. And spoiler alert, they don't. Because people who are sorry don't demand a response. They repair regardless of being seen. But them, they can't stop reaching for your reaction, like a drowning man flailing for the very storm that sank him. There's a special kind of silence that unnerves people. Not the cold shoulder, not ghosting, but that surgical detachment that comes when someone has processed the entire pattern and chosen peace over explanation. That's the silence you wield now, the kind that suggests you saw everything and decided it wasn't worth your breath. Because you know now, people don't misunderstand you on accident. They weaponize confusion to avoid accountability. And when you stopped playing translator to your own soul, they were left alone with a language they never cared to learn. And they're choking on every word they once interrupted. You used to think closure was a conversation, that if you could just say it right, if you could find the perfect sequence of words, they'd finally understand. But now you know better. Closure isn't what you get when they understand. It's what you take when you realize they won't. And so you stopped speaking. Not because you ran out of words, but because you ran out of willingness. The burden of explaining your reality to people committed to misunderstanding it? Gone. The desire to narrate your pain so they'd label it valid? Dead. You buried the need to be heard and resurrected the will to be free. They watch you now like someone reading an encrypted text they once had the password to. But you changed the code. You rewrote the access points. You no longer signal when you're hurt. You no longer overshare when you're anxious. You no longer defend the boundary. You embody it. And your silence isn't empty. It's armed. Every unspoken sentence becomes a mirror they can't look away from. Every lack of response forces them to look inward, and that internal reflection, it's the one thing they never rehearsed for. Because when the person you once dismantled yourself for no longer needs to be seen, you become a ghost that haunts, not one that begs. The moment you stopped giving them a role in your story, they lost their identity. You no longer let them edit your truth. You no longer shrink your paragraphs to fit their comfort zones. You write long. You write raw. You write in silence. Because nothing disrupts a manipulator's narrative like a person who no longer narrates their pain aloud. You've made peace with being the villain in their version, because in yours, you're the survivor, the strategist, the one who turned every failed apology into a brick and built a fortress of discernment. They designed the cage according to the version of you they could manipulate, not the real you, their constructed avatar of you, the one who apologized too fast, the one who translated silence into self-blame, the one who gave them the benefit of the doubt after every cut. They studied that version like a blueprint, mistaking submission for stability. And while they played the role of controller, what they missed entirely was the hum beneath your stillness. Growth, pressure, a quiet, violent becoming. You weren't docile, you were dormant. And when you emerged, when your behavior no longer matched their notes, their power shattered like stained glass under a hammer. Because nothing breaks control, like evolution, they didn't predict. Especially when it's no longer powered by rage, but precision. They clung to routine manipulation, recycled tactics. They reached for the same emotional levers, expecting the same collapse. But evolution makes you unreadable. You stopped speaking in their language. You switched dialects mid-chapter. You became the paradox they never trained for. Calm, but ruthless. Open-eyed, but inaccessible. They fed off your past, so you burned the record. Now, their strategy echoes like a joke told to an audience that's moved on. They can't adapt, because their control wasn't rooted in strength. It was rooted in your predictability. And the moment you changed your rhythm, the puppet strings turned to dust in their hands. Their scripts now read like instructions for a device that no longer exists. What rattled them most wasn't your distance. It was your shapeshift. They expected the usual arc: cry, confront, crumble. Instead, you vanished into reinvention. You didn't just evolve emotionally. You changed mentally, spiritually, physically. You recalibrated your presence. Every cell moved with new voltage. Every word carried different gravity. And they didn't know how to grip you anymore, because the creature they once fed confusion to now eats it for fuel. Your unpredictability isn't chaos, it's strategy. You no longer react. You respond. You no longer seek peace. You embody it. And when they try to bait you with the same old hooks, they find themselves fishing in a desert. You walk into rooms now with energy they can't decode. You're no longer the predictable empath, the one who cracked open their own chest just to make others feel understood. You're the mirror now, the one that doesn't flatter, only reflects. And that reflection burns them, because it shows the power, dynamic, reversed. They can't rehearse for you anymore. They don't know which mask to wear. The ones that used to disarm you now feel absurd. You watch them flail beneath the surface of their own projection, trying to find the old version of you, the one that stayed, the one that cared. But that version evaporated in the heat of your awakening. And the new you, it requires no audience. They feel you before they see you. Your presence moves like smoke, silent but inescapable. It floods their stories, their justifications. It infects the old power they thought they still had. Your unpredictability reprogrammed the hierarchy. You went off script. And when the other actor leaves the stage mid-scene, the play dies. That's what you did. Not with a monologue, with absence, with evolution, with a level of growth so radical, it rendered the entire dynamic obsolete. They can't mimic it. They can't follow you into this next chapter, because they're still stuck in the preface, rewriting history to make sense of your escape. See, evolution is betrayal to those who need you to stay broken. Growth, to them, is treason, because it removes their access. And now, they watch you rise and call it ego, call it detachment, call it changing too fast. But what they really mean is, you didn't ask for permission. You didn't wait for their blessing to shift. You changed shape without warning, and they can't recognize the creature they once caged. That's what true growth is. Not loud, not performative, just inconvenient for anyone who depended on your stagnation to maintain their superiority. They call you unpredictable, like it's a flaw. But unpredictability is protection. It's your firewall. It's the unspoken declaration. You no longer know where to land your traps. You've become the variable they can't prepare for. And people fear what they can't predict, because prediction is control's backbone. You've removed the spine from their structure. Now they tremble at your silence, misinterpret your calm, fear you, because they know. Beneath that stillness is calculation. Beneath that grace is choice. And beneath that absence, a power they'll never reclaim. You no longer warn them. You no longer drop clues. Your growth doesn't knock. It invades. You're not seeking closure. You're building architecture where apology doesn't matter anymore. You aren't waiting for them to realize what they lost. You've already replaced it. Your identity no longer includes their chaos. You stripped their influence, from your DNA. And when they reach for you now, all they find is air. No tension to manipulate. No guilt to exploit. Just space. Space they once occupied. Space they lost the moment they stopped seeing your softness as a gift and started seeing it as leverage. You became unpredictable, not to punish, but to protect. Because there is no more dangerous game than giving someone access to your patterns. And you've erased every one of them. What used to be a predictable response is now a stare. What used to be an argument is now a walkaway. What used to be silence born of fear is now silence born of authority. You don't owe them predictability. You don't owe them continuity. You owe yourself evolution, even if it means becoming a stranger to the very people who depended on knowing your every next move. They wore the mask with elegance, practiced charm, perfected expressions. They didn't just lie, they performed. Every conversation was staged, every apology rehearsed, every compliment timed like a cue on a script they wrote without your consent. Their smiles were props, their empathy, costume jewelry. It looked real enough until you touched it. They weren't seeking connection, they were seeking audience. And you were front row until you stood up mid-scene and walked out. What they never expected was that you were never just watching. You were building. While they wrote dialogue, you constructed foundation. While they acted out significance, you bled for substance. And when their applause faded and the curtain dropped, they looked around and saw nothing but themselves, while you stood beneath a sky you carved with your own hands. They mistook your humility for naivety, your belief in depth for gullibility. But while they were refining the performance, you were confronting your shadows. You weren't looking for a role to play. You were looking for truth. And that made you dangerous. Because truth doesn't perform. It collapses the stage. You spoke plainly while they delivered monologues. You asked real questions while they offered slogans. They needed your belief to fuel their illusion. But illusions crumble when reality doesn't clap. And when you stopped clapping, when you stopped validating the character they were pretending to be, they had nowhere left to perform. The crowd dissipated, the spotlight dimmed, and the silence, it exposed the hollowness behind their mask. You built something they couldn't fake, a presence so real, it made their act suffocating. They couldn't breathe around your authenticity because it shamed their performance into submission. Every time you showed up raw, they felt the makeup melt off their act. You didn't call them out. You just lived with too much honesty for them to exist beside you comfortably. Your grounded presence became a kind of spiritual indictment. It said everything their script avoided. That's why they mocked you. That's why they tried to outshine you. Because they couldn't understand how someone could be whole without the costume. You didn't need a mask. And in their world, that made you the most terrifying character of all. You weren't seeking applause. You were seeking peace. That's the threat they never accounted for. They knew how to handle jealousy, competition, even rage. But peace? Peace is unpredictable. Peace doesn't need to be seen. It doesn't need to win. It doesn't play by the rules of performance. And so, your grounded detachment made you a ghost in their theater. A quiet truth walking through their loudest scenes. You didn't want to steal the show. You wanted to leave the building. And when you did, they were forced to perform alone. Their mask felt heavier without you watching. Their lines fell flat without your energy anchoring them. They hoped you'd come back, not to reconnect, but to validate. They needed someone to remember their performance fondly. Someone to say, "You were convincing, but you don't entertain actors anymore. You outgrew theater. You live in truth." And truth has no need for lighting cues, for scripted apologies, for dramatic pacing. Truth happens messy, quiet, raw. While they framed their story with camera angles and mood music, you were learning how to build a life that didn't need an audience. And that life, it's invulnerable to performance. It's immune to flattery. It doesn't respond to guilt. It simply exists on its own terms. They tell people you changed, that you became distant, detached. But what they really mean is, you stopped playing your part.